Welcome back to the UAE careers community. We are enjoying another incredible talk. We have with us today Wardah Sandia, who is going to be discussing careers for the UAE. Before I take you through the topic, I want to introduce our incredible speaker. Wardah Sandia is a career development specialist. She has over 10 years of experience in higher education institutions, working with students to guide them through the transition from learner to leader. She's going to be telling us all about those careers in the United Arab Emirates, the UAE. Really important to be on this call if you are thinking about staying in the UAE after your secondary studies or even returning to the UAE. And of course, if you're a national student, this talk is going to be very, very interesting for you, as you'll want to be learning more about some of those up and coming trend type careers. She's going to be giving us a brief introduction to not only careers, but more so the top growing careers in the UAE, such as creative content creators, digital space developers, e-commerce, and business development. I'm going to let her continue talking more detail about that. She's also going to briefly introduce the top growing industries for, and I'm going to say it, entrepreneurship. I don't know if I've ever seen a part of the world where entrepreneurship is thriving as much as the UAE. And I am really excited that Wardah is going to take us through that. She's going to talk about some of those skills required for the emerging markets, from cognitive skills to system skills and complex problem solving skills. It's all about thinking outside the box and how to become a thought leader. I love this because that word, that phrase, thought leader, is becoming ever more paramount. We're seeing it with influencers around the world more and more today. And of course, wearing the hat of a careers practitioner, Wardah is going to be talking about the importance of incorporating career guidance. Wardah, what a pleasure. I feel like I'm right at the front of an incredible TED Talk, and I have a VIP seat. It's so exciting to have you here with me. You are one of our founding members of the UAE careers community, and you've returned to us after a couple of years. It's exciting to share this platform, and I'm more excited for young people to learn about these careers. So I'm going to zip my lip, turn the camera over to you, and give you front and center stage.
Thank you so much, Maria, for the lovely introduction. Thank you for not hyping it up at all. That doesn't put any sort of pressure. But again, my name is Wardah, as Maria said, and today I'm going to be talking not just about the careers that are growing in the UAE, but also how we can be preparing for those careers. Now, again, everyone talks about the importance of having a university degree, but the way I'm going to be talking about it, there's a lot of careers that you don't actually need degrees for, or whether you have a degree in one thing or another and you end up in a career that's not really in that field. I mean, my first degree was in finance, and I started working in it and realized, you know what, this is not for me. I loved studying it. I loved all the students, all the professors. I loved the coursework. But once I started working, I realized, you know what, the environment, it's not my scene. And it wasn't just that I worked in one place, I worked in a couple. So, you know what, how do we deal with things like that? And it's all about being adaptable, which is one of the soft skills that I'm going to be discussing today. And so it's too much talking. I'll get into the PowerPoint. I'm going to share my screen here. And here we go.
Perfect.
So the talk I'm going to be giving today is preparing for careers in the UAE. And really, before we get into it, not just in the UAE, but careers overall, how to manage your career in your life, how to acquire the skills that you're going to need going forward. And it's going to be less about job roles and more about growth industries. So growing careers in the UAE currently are specialized medical and engineering roles. Now, we all know the time that we live in. Innovation in medical technology engineering is at the forefront. I mean, there are a few things that have come out recently. Who knew we could have a vaccine in a year and a half, right? I mean, I never thought it. Then there's a lot of growth in digital content and freelancing in those. Now, earlier in the day, I gave a talk about side hustles, and I talked in great detail. If you missed it, please check it out later when the recording is available. I talked in great detail about content creators and how you can develop those skills and basically make some good money. Creating content for affiliate marketers online. You can have your own blogs. You can write product descriptions on websites. All of this is a growing field, and more often than not, they pay by the word. E-commerce is growing. I know some people who have drop shipping businesses in the country. Drop shipping is basically it's kind of like a shipping business without going into too much detail. I want people to do their own research about this. And then there's a lot of digital marketing specialists, business development and sales, professional and personal coaches, education roles. There's a lot of growth in language services where companies like Transcribe Me or translationservices.com hire a lot of people freelance to do translation and transcription services, whereby you're sent a recording and you have to type out what's on the recording. A lot of medical companies use this as well, and you're paid per minute. Then there's a lot of general business roles. There's a lot of growth in the technology sector, in finance, in online news, journalism, in a lot of creative contents, and of course, entrepreneurship. Like Maria said, this is the part of the world we live in. There are more entrepreneurs, more small and medium businesses than there are large companies. And you can have your own business in any of these fields, or you can have your own side hustle in any of these fields. Now, what are some of the skills that we need for these jobs or these careers that we spoke about? There are two types of skills. You need hard skills and soft skills. Hard skills refer to job-related knowledge and abilities that employees need to perform their job duties effectively. Soft skills, on the other hand, are the personal qualities that help employees really thrive in the workplace. Hard skills help employers identify candidates who are good on paper. You know, when you have on your CV that you know how to use a certain software, that's a hard skill. But a soft skill is something that you show rather than tell. And this indicates to employers which of the candidates are good in person. And you should always be a good mix of hard and soft skills to be successful in any role in life. So, hard skills and where to acquire them. Now, if we go back to the growing careers in the UAE, you will notice that aside and apart from certain specialized medical and engineering roles, you don't really need a university degree for any of these roles. What you need are skills, specialized skills. And what are these skills and how do we acquire them? So some of the skills that are in demand currently are cloud computing, AI, sales leadership. This is basically being, a good salesman, how to sell. Analysis, translation, mobile app development, people management, video production, audio production, user interface design, search engine optimization or marketing, blockchain, industrial design, digital journalism, animation, creativity, collaboration, adaptability, time management. Now, some of these skills are hard skills, and some of these are soft. How do you acquire hard skills? here are some of the resources. The best one I've found by far is YouTube. Now, there is a video that will teach you to do anything, and I mean anything. Memrise, Coursera, Allison, these are all good ones. Khan Academy, Open Culture, Skillshare, one of my favorites. Duolingo is good, is when you're learning a new language. Now, the big no is something I've discovered recently, and it's a health education platform that teaches you emotional skills like resilience, or how to handle stress, or how to navigate your anxiety, and not just at work, but with anything. And the Open University, one of my favorites as well, it's linked to online departments of various major universities all across the world, where you can take their classes for free. Now, last year, I took some art history courses for free online with Stanford University in the US. And why did I do that? It's because I'm a huge nerd. But I could have easily, with the time that I spent learning about Rembrandt, I could have learned search engine optimization, which I do know how to do. I could have learned user design, user interface design. I could have learned how to create mobile apps. I could have learned cloud computing with 2 courses. I could have learned all I could ever possibly need to know about artificial intelligence with 3 courses. I could have learned how to animate, how to do digital design, and I could have also learned video and audio production. All of these courses available to you either for free or for a low cost at any of these resources. Again, these are some hard skills that you can acquire, and no one is stopping you. The information is free online. Now, soft skills are different. You have to develop them with time. The first one, which is one of the most important ones, is communication. Why you need it is both written and verbal communication skills are most important in the workplace because they set the tone for how people perceive you. They improve your chances of building relationships with coworkers. Communication skills boost your performance because they help you extract clear expectations from your manager so you can deliver excellent work. Why employers look for it? Workers are more productive when they know how to communicate with their peers. If you can clearly express the who, what, when, where, and why of a project, then you're going to be a hot ticket. And how you can gain it, one of the best ways, if you're not part of any sort of debate society, is to become involved. I know that Toastmasters is open to new members, and it's great to get some public speaking skills. Teamwork. Why you need it? Company success is rarely dependent on one person doing something all by himself. Now, teamwork is one of those skills that you can only acquire by working with others. You can't be a good team player if you're a lone wolf. You know, I know some of us like to think that, no, you know what, I can handle it better on my own, or oh, you know what, it's gonna get messy. It's easier if I do it all on my own. But what a team does is that you work towards a common goal and everyone has different strengths. So it's always better, in my opinion, to work in a team. Employers look to team players to help build a friendly office culture, which helps retain employees and attracts top talent. Furthermore, being able to collaborate well with your coworkers strengthens the quality of your work. Now, when you're in school and college, when you get assignments that you're supposed to work on in a pair or a team or a group, It's not done to torture you, I swear. It's done so that you can build some teamwork skills and some communication skills. You know, when you're talking to each other and saying, all right, you do this bit of the group project, I'll do that bit of the group project, what you're actually doing is you're going through the information, the data, you're synthesizing it, and then you're divvying it up, you're communicating it to the team, what each person needs to be doing. Now, the most important skill I find, in not just this day and age, but always and forever, is adaptability. You should always be adaptable. Like, I think of when the lockdowns began and everybody was forced to work from home, a lot of people didn't know what was going on. I mean, there's stories of people being depressed, not knowing what to do. I mean, it all starts out with everybody still getting dressed for work, but showing up at their laptop, not knowing what's going on. So you should always be adaptable. And this is really how you succeed. You need these soft skills to be able to manage the reality as it changes. And successful leaders, successful thought leaders, know when to be flexible instead of being insistent on, no, this is the way it's always been done, and this is the way we're going to do it. I have seen people fail based on their stubbornness, and I have seen people go from nothing to overnight successes by being adaptable to the market. You have to be adaptable to the changes, not just in the workplace, but in the market. If you see a change coming, you should be able to adopt early. And you should always keep up to date on online trainings and courses. Now, this is again where the resources I mentioned earlier come in. Always stay current. Let's say you're working in the digital marketing field and there's a new software out. There's no harm in taking a couple hours a week and learning it. You should always keep up to date with any sort of new changes that are coming up, any industry trends, anything. I mean, I remember when companies were switching their email browsers from something to Gmail, like when major companies switched from whatever they were using, Zimbra, I believe used to be back in the day, and switching to Gmail or Microsoft Mail. And you would be shocked at how many grown people did not know how to handle that, how many emails they would send out to IT complaining they didn't like the new system, that they didn't like Gmail, that they wanted to go back to the old system, even though it wasn't as good or as fast, but just because that's the way they were used to doing things. So it doesn't seem like much, but to be a leader, to be successful in life, you should always, always be adaptable. It's good for you. It's good for the people you're around, for your colleagues, for the company you work for, and for those who you will possibly lead one day. The next skill that's very important these days, or in general, is problem solving. Why you need it? When something goes wrong, you can either complain or take action, going back to the example I just mentioned. Knowing how to think on your feet can make you indispensable to an employer. So this is a skill where, you know, there's a problem, but instead of just complaining or stating the problem, you say, so this is our problem, and you know what, this is the solutions that I've come up with. What does everybody think? You know, you put it to the team. Again, there's teamwork. And then you communicate within your team. There's another one. And this is how top performers are born. No one is born being a top performer. You become it. You have to be able to navigate unexpected challenges. Like I said, never go to someone with just a problem. Always be the one who comes up with a solution. That's how you lead. Critical observation. Now, like I said earlier, data doesn't mean anything unless you know how to synthesize it and interpret it. Is there a pattern? What are these numbers telling me? Or what is this trend telling me? What does it mean if so-and-so company is only hiring people that have knowledge in user interface design? It probably means that that company is about to launch a new app or a new website or a new technology. Why else would they be hiring people who know how to design user interface? You should always be looking around, trying to observe, and just it just makes for a better worker. Now, companies need critical thinkers because critical thinkers bring a fresh perspective. Again, going back, it's not about how things have been done. It's about being a disruptor, being a thought leader, having a fresh perspective, offering intuitive solutions. How can we fix this problem? Always having a solution or part of the solution. It is not important that you have the solution right off the bat, but it is important to show the initiative that, you know what, I'm coming with something that can possibly lead to a solution. How do you improve an internal process, or how do you get a leg up on a competition? It's the initiative that shows that you have indeed observed a situation correctly. You're communicating it to your team, and by teamwork, you are able to problem solve. Now, to be a critical observer, you need to be able to analyze information. One tactic is to try and identify patterns of behavior at work. Does your boss actually read the weekly sales report? What was her reaction to bad news in the staff meeting? What's the best time of day to approach your manager with a question? Now, a story comes to mind. A colleague of mine said that the best time to deliver bad news about sales quotas not being have met was between 3 and 4 p.m. on the end of the week, preferably before a long holiday. And she usually did this because, she used to be behind her sales quotas a lot. So she would usually inform the boss on a Thursday, back when the weekend was Friday, Saturday. She'd go in Thursday around 3 p.m. and say, you know what, these are the numbers for the week. And wasn't able to meet the quota. And you know what? The boss never actually got mad at her, because even though she wasn't the best at sales, even though she wasn't the best at meeting her quota, she had somehow deduced that this is the time that her boss is going to be in a good mood and not get mad. Now, it wasn't just that it was about to be the weekend. It wasn't anything apart from the fact that the boss had her coffee and once a week dessert right before 3 p.m. So the boss was just in a good mood at the time. So this is just one example of how, by observing people, you can control the flow of information and be able to better understand critical aspects of improving business operations. And of course, there's critical thinking, not just observation, but then again, we come from the problem-solving mindset where you observe the problem and then you come to the solution via critical thinking. This relies on your ability to draw on experience, gather information, and ask the relevant questions to form the necessary judgments. Ultimately, the goal is to find the best objective solution to a problem, rather than the one that aligns with your preconceived notions and personal biases. You will need to consider all evidence, assess alternate points of view, keep an open mind, allow results to alter your approach. Now, within the practice of critical thinking, you'll be able to refine your research skills, learn how to process data, and be able to distinguish between relevant and irrelevant information. This will help you to become a more strategic and open-minded employee, one who is highly adaptable with a track record of sound decision making. And lastly, one of the most important skills is time management. The ability to manage your own time involves being realistic about your capabilities and prioritizing your workload to ensure what you consistently meet deadlines. Leaders must be able to manage their own time as well as the time of others. They need to consider individual workflows when delegating tasks and prioritizing them within the company's wider goals. Now, I'm going to talk briefly about the time management matrix. I do believe this will probably have already been covered in one or more of the talks today. But there's essentially 4 quadrants. The first one, which is urgent and important. Second, which is important but not urgent. Then there is things that are not important, but they are urgent. And then there are things that are neither urgent nor important. Now, my personal view is that absolutely nothing apart from a fire alarm or impending doom is urgent and important. You should never let things get to a point where they're so last minute that they become urgent and important. Because you always got to leave yourself that buffer. So things that are urgent and important, you got to do them right now. They can't wait. Things that are important but not urgent, you should always schedule a time to do them because they're important. Things that are not important yet urgent, you should always delegate them or you should try to minimize them. And things that are neither important nor urgent should be deleted right away. You don't need to do that. Eliminate the waste. Now, word about leadership. The phrase leadership skills is so overused, misused, thrown around like nothing else. What does it mean to be a leader? Now, you're not just leading others. First, you must lead yourself. He who conquers himself, right? Or she who conquers herself. Now, all the skills I've talked about, time management, this is a leadership skill for self-management and managing others. Critical thinking is a leadership skill. Critical observation, problem solving, being adaptable. Leaders have to be adaptable. Working in teams and communicating well with those teams. All of these are leadership skills that you develop. Having confidence and a clear vision can help you influence not just your coworkers, but even your bosses and beyond. Displaying leadership skills helps you gain visibility within an organization. If you're a good worker, if people see you, actually see you and speak well of you, it will lead to more and more opportunities for you. People, bosses, managers are always looking for people with potential who they can promote. And lastly, being a leader isn't just about getting people to do what you want. It's about inspiring others and helping others reach their full potential. Then I go on to say that one way to do this is become an internship supervisor, which gives you the opportunity to manage people, learn how to motivate a team and take on more responsibility. But when you're in school, when you're in college, when you're working on assignments, it's always good to be the person who says, all right, let's talk about this project. Who's going to be doing what? You never want to be the person who's autocratic. Remember, that's a type of leader as well. You don't want to be the person who says, all right, you, A, you're doing this. You, B, you're doing that. C, you're doing this. You don't want to divvy up a project in a team without getting everyone's take on it, without assessing what everyone's better skills are. This comes from knowing your team. Let's say you're in a group project with your friends. You don't want to give the person who is notorious for not being a morning person, wakes up past noon, the task of, let's say, calling up the company that you're doing a project about or going to meet someone early in the morning. That's just bad leadership. Or you don't want to give the person who is just no good at design the job of, let's say, formatting your presentation or working on the visual appeal of it, right? You want the person who's good at design, who knows what aesthetically pleasing presentations should look at, be the last person to go over the presentation. You want the person who is just neurotic about details to go over the presentation and tell you where there are typos and grammatical errors. You don't want people who are, just not paying attention to what you're saying, being the ones who will be doing most of the talking during the presentation. These are just some ways where you can be a leader, a thought leader, any kind of leader at any age, whether you're in school, you're in college, you're starting out your careers, wherever you are in your life, in your career, you can be a thought leader wherever you are. Anyway, that brings me to the end of my speaking portion. If anyone has any questions, I would love to take them right now.
Amazing. Why don't you switch your camera back on and
There we are.
Stick my lucky mic in. That was very, very insightful. Thank you, Wardah, for doing that for us. I think like that you mentioned quite a few really interesting things. So I'm looking at the chat box as we're going to have this conversation. If anybody has anything that they want to add to the question Q&A part just before we say goodbye, please do feel free to do that right now. And while you do, I'll take advantage of my VVVIP seat here and have this conversation. Wardah, you mentioned some really insightful things to be thinking about. And one of the things that really stands out for me is the word assumptions. And I think it's something that it was in the scope of what you were talking about. And I liked how you defined what things were. And I think this is a really important key, especially for a practitioner who is helping a young person prepare for the world of work. And if you are a young person watching this right now, or even just closer to employment, or maybe even thinking about changing employment, I think this key is important. And I feel like all of our talks in room 3 today have kind of met at this point where assumptions being, if we don't define what things mean, we will not be able to really align. So honing into an example of teamwork, you were mentioning what that looks like. Do you find that in this part of the world, because your topic is careers in the UAE, do you find that in the UAE that this is one of the challenges that you see with young people preparing for the world of work, is that they don't have the right context, and that is part of the challenge in understanding how to be working with other people? And I know Dan in the talk right before yours was talking about diversity in the workplace. Do you think that context and assumptions about what we think is the right thing to do is something that if we are going to work in the UAE, we need to pay more attention to?
Absolutely. And I know I chose to talk about these skills in particular because it's just right now what I hear mostly from people, that, you know what, young kids coming out of college or coming out of school these days don't know how to be this, or stuff that we're reading. Or just from my own personal experience working with students, students have spent the last 2 years studying from their desks at home. just being in that environment, a lot of the times not even paying attention to their teacher or their class, let alone classmates. So I think a lot of what we had when it came to teamwork has also been lost. I'm not saying that there was ever a time when people in the region were very good at working in teams. I used to work for a company where one time we had a trainer from Google come in and talk to us about teamwork. And I thought, what a strange topic. Like, we work in teams all the time. But that's where I learned some of these things, that how are you supposed to be in a team anyway? I mean, I know it sounds intuitive now, like, you should assign tasks in a team based on a person's strengths. I know it seems intuitive, but most managers don't do that. They just say, all right, you know what, you're in charge of this, you're doing this, you're doing this. And that is how we used to do it back when we were in college. When we were saying, let's say, all right, we're working on a paper, you do the intro, you do this, and you can just like fix all the stuff in the end because you're no good anyways. You can just like go over it in the end when we're done with it. But the person who we assigned that to, who's just no good at anything, lacks attention to detail, doesn't understand visual appeal, doesn't know how to close a paper, how to make sure all the evidence is cited, all, how to center all the images, like all the images have to be centered. It's very basic stuff. It's very basic stuff, but it makes or breaks a paper, let's say, if that is the assignment. Right? The content can be great, but if it doesn't look right, the professor's like, I don't want to read this, you know?
Yeah. So what I want to do is remind that we're not only talking about students right now, we're really talking about those employment skills. So in the workplace, you're right there, organizations are saying there's a really big gap in what they need to have.
Yeah.
And here in the UAE, but do you think that in the UAE, we have particular needs that are different to other parts of the world? And if so, how do we prepare young people for paying more attention to those needs?
There's cultural considerations as well. Obviously, some people are just generally good at some things, and that does come from the culture that they belong to, without being too specific. And I do always say that managers should be more aware of that. I think it's, when it comes to a workplace, it is as important to train managers in how to manage people, and not just manage people, but how to manage people successfully so that their people are successful, and not just the person themselves, not the manager, but the team, the people in the team. And a big part of that is understanding people's core competencies.
Fantastic. So if you're watching this right now and you're thinking, how do I prepare myself for a career in the UAE? I think touching back on when you were talking about entrepreneurship, it's pay attention to what the trends are, but also pay attention to the messaging of the country. So we can see right now that there's a real enabling of young entrepreneurs in the UAE. So pay attention to that, and also look at some of those topics of interest in terms of digital enhancements of careers in the UAE. And then I think another really important skill that one must be paying attention to, and I know you talked about it in different parts of yours, and Dan talked about it before, as you also said, is cultural awareness. Definitely something, if you're planning on working in the UAE, you do want to be culturally aware. You want to be culturally intelligent. They call that diversity intelligence as well. And that's not something that you learn at school. It's something that you learn by reflecting, and something that you learn by really interacting. Wardah, it's been such a pleasure talking with you today, and it's been so great to have you presenting. I know that you had a few other talks in the other rooms. It was a great pleasure to have you as a guest with me here today. And I can't see any other questions coming through that chat box, but if anybody does think of a question after we say goodbye to Wardah, feel free to send them out to us and we will be able to answer them. And of course, as with all the other talks, This is recorded and will be available for everyone to watch again. So right before I say goodbye, we have one more incredible speaker. I'm going to go with the saying, save the best for last. Our final speaker of the day in room 3 is the one and only Krupa Gathani, who is going to be talking about another trending talk. She's going to be focusing on the generalist versus the specialist. Definitely something any young person considering secondary education wants to join, or anyone at university right now thinking, what am I going to do with my degree? You might fall into one of these two categories. Her aim is to help students understand that a generalist and a specialist will help them to identify which approach is best suited for them. So we're going to take a little break and we will meet you back here at 5 p.m.